I walked past the house I grew up in with a suitcase in one hand and not a single plan for turning back. From the sidewalk, I could hear laughter echoing out the kitchen window. Someone dropped a fork. Then a voice called, "We're out of plates again!" They were having a party, one of the big ones, streamers, matching napkins. My cousin Brittany probably brought cupcakes, and my mum was probably pretending to hate how sweet they were. I wasn't invited. Not because we had a fight, not because I moved across the country, not because they didn't know where I lived, but because, for them, I've always been optional, like a folding chair they keep in the garage, useful when company's over, but the second they don't need you, folded, forgotten. I didn't cry, not this time. Instead, I walked right past the front gate, turned the corner, and disappeared. In my bag was everything I needed: a new lease, a warm coat, and a letter I wrote myself last night. It wasn't a revenge letter. It wasn't even angry. It just said, I deserve to belong to myself now. That was the moment everything started. Not when they left me out. Not when they forgot my birthday for the third year in a row. Not when I sat in the hallway on Thanksgiving because there were no more chairs. But when I chose not to explain myself anymore. I was 7 the first time I noticed the extra chair was gone. It was Grandma's birthday, and the whole family had squeezed around the long table with the gold-trimmed plates and too many forks. My cousins were laughing over soda cans. Someone spilled juice. I remember the scent of roast chicken and warm bread, but there weren't enough seats. I stood at the edge of the room, hands folded, waiting for someone to notice. "Just grab the folding chair from the garage," my uncle said without looking at me. I turned to go, but Brittany, older, quieter, always careful, slipped into the kitchen and came back with it before I could. She placed it at the corner of the table. The metal scraped the floor like it didn't belong. That was my seat. Everyone else had chairs with cushions. Mine wobbled, cold, no armrests. Nobody said anything. That night, when I asked Mum why there weren't enough seats, she frowned like I was being dramatic. "There were plenty," she said. "You had one, didn't you?" I did, technically, but it felt like I was only there because they forgot to exclude me. Later, I saw a photo from that night framed in the hallway, everyone smiling, cake in midair. My folding chair wasn't in the shot. I was cropped out now, just arms and a sliver of sleeve. I didn't ask why. It was easier not to ask, because asking meant hoping, and hope is heavier when no one else is carrying it. Years later, I still remember the weight of that chair when I carried it back to the garage, how the cold metal pinched my fingers, how I placed it beside the old beach umbrella, like it never belonged inside to begin with. That's when it started, this quiet understanding. I was never part of the picture, just part of the background. It took me years to realise they didn't mean to ignore me. They just didn't know how to see me. My mum wasn't a bad person. She made dinner. She worked late. She remembered every single one of Brittany's piano recitals. She even bought me a new backpack once with my initials stitched in, but she never asked how school was. Never noticed when I stopped sitting at the table. Never asked why I wore the same sweater 3 days in a row. Dad was even quieter. He'd come home, sigh, and melt into the couch. I once got a 96 on a science test and left it on the fridge for a week. He never saw it. Or if he did, he never said anything. When I was 12, I found an old voicemail from my mom on the landline. She'd accidentally called me instead of Brittany. "Hey, sweetie. Don't forget your solos in 2 days. I'm so proud of you." I listened to it 5 times. I never had a solo. Later that night, I drew a picture in my journal, 2 chairs side by side. One had me scribbled under it. The other was empty. Brittany found it. She didn't say anything, just looked at it, then quietly ripped the page out and put it in her pocket. That was her way of protecting me, I think. Not by speaking up, but by making sure nobody else ever saw it. In her world, survival meant fitting in, not standing out. And in ours, invisibility was safer than rejection. My parents weren't monsters. They were distracted, stretched thin, carrying their own bruises. Mum once told me she was the middle child, quiet, overlooked. She used to sit in closets to cry so her siblings wouldn't laugh at her. She never said that's why she didn't notice me, but maybe it was easier for her to look away, because looking at me meant remembering how that felt. Maybe Dad thought if he didn't say the wrong thing, he couldn't fail. So he said nothing. They weren't trying to hurt me, but silence can hurt just the same. It was Thanksgiving. The first one I came home for after starting my new job out of state. I wore a blouse I was proud of, carried a pie I actually baked. It wasn't perfect, but it mattered to me. The house smelled like nutmeg and roasted turkey. For a second, walking through the door, I thought maybe this time would be different. But then I stepped into the dining room. Everyone had a place card. Brittany, her boyfriend, my uncle, even the neighbours across the street. I stood there holding my pie, scanning the table. There was no chair for me, not in the corner, not by the kitchen, not even a folding one. Just a spot between Brittany and my cousin David, with no chair and no plate. Oops, Mum called from the stove. We must have miscounted. No one moved. No one made room. They just kept chatting. Brittany looked at me and then looked away. I stood there, still holding the pie. My arms ached, but not as much as my chest. Dad mumbled something like, "There's a stool in the garage," but no one got it. I felt the heat rise behind my eyes. Then I did something I didn't plan. I set the pie down on the counter gently. I took one step back, and I walked out. I heard the clink of silverware behind me as the meal began. Not one person followed. Not one asked, "Where are you going?" It wasn't anger that drove me out the door. It was the quiet knowing, the kind you don't scream, the kind that shows up as a single, final breath in your chest that says, "This is not my home." Outside, I sat on the porch steps and stared at my phone. I wanted to call someone, anyone, just to say, "Happy Thanksgiving." But all I had was voicemail and silence. That was the last family dinner I ever attended. And the moment I realised I had been trying to earn a chair in a room that was never mine to begin with. The first apartment wasn't much. One bedroom, off the highway. The walls were too thin, and the heating clanked like it was coughing up ghosts. But it was mine. No one rolled their eyes when I came home late. No one asked why I wasn't smiling at dinner. Because there wasn't a dinner. Just a small square table from IKEA, with one chair. It didn't wobble. And that felt like a start. Most nights I ate standing by the sink-cheap pasta, frozen vegetables, cereal if I was too tired. But even that tasted like freedom. There was quiet here, and not the kind that hurts. I'd wake up to my alarm, not to slammed doors. I'd boil tea just to hear the kettle whistle, just to remind myself that something in this space was made for me. My calendar filled with little things, groceries, rent due, therapy. Call Jenna back. Jenna. My only friend who stayed. She never asked what happened at Thanksgiving. She just sent me a recipe and said, "Make this, then call me, or don't. I'll be here." Sometimes I didn't respond. And she still stayed. There were nights I thought about calling my mum, not out of longing out of reflex, but I didn't. Because I knew she wouldn't ask how I was. She'd ask why I disappeared. That's what they do, rewrite the story until it sounds more comfortable. So I kept building, slow, quiet, one drawer organised at a time. I found a job at a local bookstore minimum wage, but soft lighting and kind co-workers. One of them had a laugh that reminded me of my aunt, the one who used to sneak me cookies before she moved away. That laugh made me feel less invisible. Sometimes I'd stare at my own reflection, brushing my teeth, and whisper, "You're here. You stayed." Not because anyone begged me to, but because I decided I deserved to take up space, even if it was just 300 square feet and one silent, steady chair. It started as a journal, just a blank Google Doc titled Notes I'll Never Send. I'd write at night, curled on the floor with my laptop, fingers freezing because the heat was out again. I didn't plan to share it. One night, I wrote about the Thanksgiving when they forgot I was allergic to walnuts and watched me eat the pie anyway. I didn't cry while writing it, but my hands shook. So I hit save. Then, for some reason, I hit publish. I didn't tell anyone, not even Jenna. But 2 days later, I checked the stats. 17 views, 1 comment. This happened to me too. It felt like a breath I didn't know I was holding. The next post was easier, a story about the folding chair. Then the birthday where they forgot to buy me a gift, but gave Brittany a necklace in front of me. Then the way my mum used to call me so sensitive every time I spoke up. I didn't use names. I didn't use hate, but I told the truth. People found it, quietly. A few at first, then dozens, then hundreds. They sent emails. They said, "You made me feel less alone." They said, "I didn't know anyone else grew up like this." They said, "I thought it was just me." And that's when I realized, maybe I wasn't the broken one. Maybe I had just grown up in a house where love was conditional and silence was survival. Jenna texted me after the 3rd post. "You okay?" I replied, "Yeah. I think I just needed to say it somewhere." She didn't say more. But she sent a photo of a coffee mug that said, "You're not too much." It made me cry. The blog didn't blow up overnight. There was no viral moment, but it grew, quietly, like me. And for the first time, people listened without demanding I make it more comfortable for them. That was new. It was 11:43 p.m. when the message came in. Just a ping. Just a name I hadn't seen on my screen in months. Dad. No. Hey. No. How are you? Just 6 words. "We saw the blog. It hurts." I stared at it for a full minute. The screen glowed in my dark room. My tea had gone cold in my hands. A dozen replies ran through my head. "So did I when you forgot my name at your work event." Did it hurt when I wasn't even worth a chair? Did it hurt when Mom said nothing while I cried in my room? But I didn't send any of them. Instead, I just sat there, breathing. I should have felt powerful, vindicated. I didn't. I felt like I was 5 again, holding a drawing of a stick figure family and wondering why mine never looked like that. I opened the text again, reread it. "We saw the blog. It hurts." What did they expect? An apology, a retraction, a thank you for finally noticing I existed. Jenna texted me an hour later, no connection, just, "Want to get pancakes tomorrow? My treat." I replied instantly, "Yes." She didn't bring up the message. She didn't ask if I was okay. But when the pancakes came, she pushed the syrup my way without a word. Like she used to when we were kids, before she learned staying quiet got her better treatment. And I realized that message wasn't the turning point because it hurt. It was the turning point because it reminded me I was never going to get the conversation I deserved. So I stopped waiting for it. My phone buzzed 5 times in 2 minutes. At first, I thought it was Jenna. Maybe she forgot her wallet. But when I looked, it was a group chat I hadn't muted yet. Family updates. The last message was from Brittany. Just 2 words. So petty. I opened it. And there they were, screenshots, old texts, ones I barely remembered sending. One from last year. "I just don't feel like going to Thanksgiving. It always ends up being about you-know-who." One from the year before that. "I'm honestly tired of pretending I feel welcome." And one from way back in college. "Sometimes I think I'd be better off without a family." Taken out of context. No replies, no timestamps, just enough to paint a picture. one I never got to finish myself. A picture of me as bitter, over-dramatic, ungrateful. They'd weaponized my honesty. I scrolled. There were likes, comments, even an aunt I hadn't seen in years chimed in. Wow, the internet really makes people brave. I could feel the screen getting warm in my hand, but my fingers were ice. And somewhere deep in my chest, a knot began to form, not of shame, of clarity. This wasn't a family trying to reach me. It was a family trying to erase their part in the story. I put the phone down, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. No tears, no rage, just breath. I checked Jenna's messages. Nothing. She didn't join the pile-on. She also didn't defend me. That silence said everything. Because in this family, there were only two choices: be the problem or be quiet. And I was done being both. I opened my laptop, not because I had something to say, but because part of me thought maybe I needed to say something. The blog was still open in another tab. Comments were flooding in, some kind, some not. But my hands hovered over the keyboard, frozen. I started typing. To everyone seeing those screenshots. Then paused, deleted it, typed again. What you're seeing is not the full story. Deleted that too. Every draft sounded like begging, like I was explaining my existence to people who were never going to listen. The blinking cursor started to feel like a metronome for shame. So I closed the tab. I checked my inbox. One message stood out from someone named Emily. Hi, I just wanted to say thank you. I read your last post and cried. I left home 3 years ago and thought I was the only one. That one line made everything around me go quiet. Because suddenly I remembered why I'd written the blog in the first place. Not for my family, not to be understood by them, but to find my voice in the middle of the noise they taught me to silence. I walked outside and sat on the small steps of my apartment, phone on silent, laptop shut. No posts, no replies, no public statement, just a quiet resolve. I don't owe anyone a response, especially not the people who built their version of me out of fragments. Instead, I whispered to no one in particular, this silence is not weakness, it's a boundary. And for the first time, it echoed back peace. By the next morning, I was trending. Not in the glamorous way, more like someone cropped one of my blog quotes onto a photo of a folding chair and it got 80,000 shares on Instagram. Every Thanksgiving, they ran out of chairs. But there was always room for guilt. The caption read, "This woman deserves an award." It was weird, flattering, but also surreal. I hadn't posted anything new, but my blog traffic exploded. People were dissecting every line I'd ever written, turning my quiet, late-night journal entries into punchlines and proof. There were videos too, reaction channels, think pieces, even a podcast episode titled Why Families Exclude Women Who Say No. I got DMs from strangers saying they cried. One said she bought an extra chair for her daughter after reading my post, and then I saw it. A comment on a reshared screenshot. This sounds exactly like my cousin. I bet it's her. Wouldn't surprise me, honestly. Username, Brittany C89. My stomach dropped. Of course she saw it. Of course she recognised me. The worst part? She didn't deny any of it. She just sounded annoyed she wasn't mentioned by name. For a second, I panicked. Not because of exposure, but because I didn't know how far this ripple would go. Was my mum reading this? Was my dad silently refreshing? Were they drafting texts, threats, apologies? The truth is, you don't realise how public your pain becomes once it's seen through someone else's screen. I'd written it to release it. Now it belonged to everyone and I had to decide. Was I okay being seen? even if they never really saw me. It started small. A client I freelance for emailed and said, "Hey, just FYI, people are asking if your blog is based on real events. It's powerful stuff." I replied with a smiley face and said it was inspired by themes of identity, which wasn't a lie. But then my old coworker messaged me out of nowhere. "Yo, this viral blog, is that about your family?" I didn't answer. Just watch the typing bubble fade away. By Friday, someone I hadn't spoken to in years tagged me in a thread titled, "When Your Trauma Becomes Someone's Entertainment." It was like being naked in a room of people who thought they were complimenting your outfit. Even the local cafe barista suite, 20-something, pink hair, slid me a note instead of my receipt. "Your post helped me walk away from my dad. Thank you." I didn't know whether to smile or cry, but the real consequence came that Sunday morning. Brittany texted me, not to apologise, not to talk, just a link, a family group chat thread. There it was, screenshots of my blog, circling phrases, my mum's reply, "Is this really how she sees us?" Then Dad, "No wonder she never calls." And Brittany just wrote, "Told you she was dramatic." I didn't even know they had a family chat without me. I stared at the screen, hands shaking, but not from sadness, not even rage. It was the clarity. They were more upset that I told the truth than about what the truth actually was. And somehow, that made everything easier. No more wondering how they'd feel. No more guilt for not reaching out. They'd already decided who I was. And now, so had I. I didn't plan to see her. I just wanted my coffee. But there she was, Brittany already in line, already waving. "Hey, stranger!" she called, like we were two long-lost best friends who'd just missed a couple brunches. I froze. For a second, I thought about pretending I didn't see her, but she was already walking over, cup in hand, smile in place. "You look great," she said, sitting across from me without asking. Seriously, glowing. I stared at her, same loose waves, same designer coat, same ability to glide over reality like it never happened. "So, you're famous now?" She laughed, sipping her latte. I didn't answer, just looked at the foam swirling in mine. "I read it, by the way," she added casually. "Your blog. Very poetic. Poetic. That was the word she picked. Not honest, not painful. Poetic." I finally looked up. "Did it feel true to you?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. She blinked, just once, then smiled again. "You've always been sensitive. It's your thing. Everyone knows that." The table went silent. People around us chatted. A couple argued over cold brew sizes. The espresso machine hissed in the background. But between us, just that old invisible wall, the one I used to climb, beg, shout over. Now I just stared at it. And then I stood up. "You know what's wild?" I said, still calm. "You were the only one I hoped would get it, not agree, just get it." Brittany tilted her head. "I do get it. You were upset. Now you're better. That's what matters, right?" I smiled, but not with my mouth, with something colder. "No. What matters is that I finally stopped asking you to see me." Then I left my coffee untouched and walked out. I didn't cry when I left the cafe. I didn't scroll through old messages, didn't text her later like I used to, trying to smooth over the tension. I walked home, and when I got there, I sat down at my tiny kitchen table and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank page, but instead of starting a new post, I opened a draft I'd written months ago, one I never published. It was raw, rambling, full of second-guessing, lines like, "Maybe I was too quiet. Maybe I read into things. Maybe it was me." I deleted the whole thing, every word. Then I stood up and walked over to my closet. From the back, I pulled out a shoebox I hadn't opened since moving. Inside, a childhood photo, me and Brittany, both maybe 10, I was holding a snow globe. She was holding a gift bag twice the size. She was smiling wide. I was smiling smaller. I remembered that party. I had saved up for that snow globe. Bought it for her. She never opened it. I slid the photo out, stared at it for a moment, then pinned it to my fridge. Not to keep the memory, but to mark the shift. I no longer needed to rewrite the story in my head. I no longer needed to guess what was wrong with me. They had seen me as background, but that didn't mean I was invisible. It just meant they didn't know how to look. And that, finally, wasn't my burden to fix anymore. That night, I started a new blog entry, but it wasn't about them. It was about choosing a quiet life on purpose. It was about joy with no audience. It was about the power of being unavailable. On Sunday morning, I woke up early. No alarm, no plan. Just the quiet kind of energy you get when your decision is already made. I brewed a small cup of coffee, poured it into my favourite mug, the one with a tiny chip on the handle, and wrapped it in a soft towel. Not to keep it safe, to make sure it didn't break too loudly. Then I printed out 3 pages. Page 1, a letter I had written to myself the night I moved out. Page 2, a blog post never published. Page 3, the childhood photo I'd pinned to the fridge. I slipped them all into a plain envelope and placed it inside a small cardboard box. The mug went in too. No ribbon, no note, just quiet. Later that day, I walked to the old house. I didn't knock. I didn't linger. I simply left the box on the front steps, tucked just beneath the welcome mat, half visible, half forgotten. Exactly like I'd always felt. Then I turned and walked away. As I reached the corner, I paused. Not because I wanted to go back, but because, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel watched. I wasn't performing. I wasn't waiting for someone to call out my name. I was alone. And I was okay. The wind picked up slightly, brushing a strand of hair across my face. I smiled and tucked it behind my ear. Some exits are dramatic. Mine wasn't. It was soft, like a lamp turning off in a room no one noticed was lit. But that softness, it was power, and it was mine. The box sat untouched for nearly a day. Then, sometime Monday afternoon, someone opened it. Brittany was the first to text me. It wasn't dramatic, just, "Hey, I saw what you left. You okay?" I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I no longer needed to explain things that were always visible. If she had to ask now, after all this time, maybe she wasn't ready for the answer. That night, my mother left a voicemail. Short, croaky. No, I'm sorry. No, we miss you. Just, you didn't have to leave the mug, you know? The line went quiet. Then, almost as an afterthought, it still smells like your cinnamon coffee. That was it. No apology, no question. But in her voice, I heard something different this time. Not anger, not pride, just a pause. And I realised something. Some people don't regret the things they do. They regret losing the version of you that tolerated them. Brittany sent another message the next morning. I reread your blog. I think I understand now. I believed her, but I still didn't reply. Because regret isn't the same as change. And understanding doesn't undo years of silence at dinner tables or pretending not to notice when someone's chair disappears. For a long time, I'd waited for this moment, for them to reach out, to finally feel seen. But standing in my quiet apartment, coffee in hand, sunrise spilling across the counter, I felt something better than validation. I felt peace. And the best part, no one had to give it to me. I gave it to myself. I wasn't expecting anything that morning. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, just a warm, grey light slipping past the blinds. I had my tea warming on the stove. No plans, No noise, just quiet. Then I heard it. A soft knock. Not urgent, not angry, just tentative, like someone hoping no one was home. I waited. Another knock. Still soft. When I opened the door, no one was there. Just a small paper bag, and beside it, the mug. My mug, the one I left on their porch 2 weeks ago. I picked it up slowly, half expecting it to be chipped or cold. But it was warm. I peeked inside. Tea. Cinnamon. The kind I always made. Not coffee tea. They remembered, and next to the mug was a small, folded note. Brittany's handwriting. You said once you never felt anyone made space for you. This is yours now. No reply needed. I didn't cry. I just stood there. One hand on the doorframe, mug pressed gently to my palm. It wasn't an apology. And it wasn't a plea. It was something in between. A ghost of understanding. I brought the mug inside. Didn't sip it. Not yet. Just placed it on the windowsill where the light could touch it. In another life, maybe I would have replied. Maybe I would have texted back. Gone back. But this version of me, she doesn't move backward. She keeps the mug. She remembers. And she lets it be what it is. A symbol not of reunion, but of return to herself. I sat at the kitchen table that morning, fingers curled around the warm mug Brittany left. Steam rose in slow ribbons. The silence was heavy, but not hostile, just full. It took me back to a birthday I'd almost forgotten. I was 12. They decorated the dining room balloons, a homemade cake. Everyone buzzed around Brittany, whose birthday was the next day. They said it made sense to just combine things. I remember sitting there, a single candle lit on a corner of her cake. Not mine, just borrowed flame. They handed me a gift from the family. It was a sweater. 2 sizes too big. No card. No one looked me in the eye, except Brittany. I saw it in her face then, just for a second. She knew, and she looked away. Back in my kitchen now, I blinked, because in that flashback, I wasn't angry, not anymore. I wasn't the girl holding the sweater. I was the one noticing the silence, the one who couldn't look too long, the one who did nothing. And suddenly, I understood Brittany. All those years, her side eyes, her quiet laughs, the times she didn't speak up, she wasn't cruel. She was surviving in a house where kindness felt like betrayal, where noticing meant you had to act. The mug in my hand felt heavier. I stood up and walked to the corner of my small kitchen where I'd kept a chair from my old bedroom, the one I used to sit in when I felt invisible. I placed the mug on it, like a marker, not for mourning, but memory. And I whispered aloud, maybe for her, maybe for me. We all did what we could. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even closure. It was clarity. And sometimes that's louder than both. The message came at 2:14 a.m., just 3 words from Brittany. You okay now? I stared at it for a long time. No emojis, no punctuation, no context. And somehow, it meant more because of that. It was the first time in years she'd initiated contact, but I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I opened the draft of the email I'd written weeks ago. To Mom. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even long. Just, I see why you couldn't look at me. Maybe it was too much to love a daughter you didn't understand. I hope you find peace, whether I'm part of it or not. I hovered over the send button, and my finger didn't move. Was it forgiveness if it felt like release, or was it just walking away quietly, with both hands finally empty? Downstairs, I heard the heat kick on, that low hum, a sound I used to associate with winter breaks when I'd wait for someone to knock on my door and say, "Come downstairs, we saved you a plate." That knock never came. I closed the email, not deleted, not sent, just closed. I got up and stepped onto the cold tiles in the kitchen, barefoot, let the chill ground me. Then I opened the drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, the one with the lease agreement for my new apartment. Different city, different story. I looked at the address, not too far, but far enough to not be a second option. Suddenly, my phone lit up again. Another message from Brittany. Found your blog, it hurt, but I get it. No defense, no blame, just wait. This time I replied, yeah, it hurt to write it too. Then I added, but I'm not angry anymore. I'm just somewhere else now. I hit send, and just like that. It wasn't about forgiveness or revenge. It wasn't about who was sorry first. It was about being done and choosing peace without permission. It was still dark when I parked outside the house. The same porch light, the same wind chimes, like time hadn't touched anything. In the back seat of my car was the chair, the one from my old room paint chipped, a loose leg I'd taped with pink duct tape when I was 13. I carried it gently to the porch. No knock, no letter, no drama, just placed it down by the door, carefully angled like someone had just gotten up. Inside, I could see faint movement kitchen lights flicked on, the sound of a mug placed on a counter. I didn't linger. I didn't need to be seen. This wasn't a return, it was a goodbye, spoken in the only language they'd ever taught me, silence. I walked back to the car, inhaling the scent of wet grass and jasmine from the hedge. Soft memories clung to the air, but they didn't sting anymore. As I started the engine, I saw a silhouette pause in the kitchen window. Mom. I recognized the outline of her robe. She noticed the chair. She didn't come out. She didn't wave, but she turned her head just slightly, and her hand hesitated mid-air, still holding the mug. It was enough. Not an apology, but a flicker. A fracture in the script of indifference. 2 weeks later, I got an email. From Brittany, no subject line, just a photo. It was her daughter, maybe 5, sitting in that same old chair, now painted sky blue with crayon-streaked paper in her lap. Caption, she likes to sit here when I read your blog out loud. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I expected. Then I smiled. Not because it fixed anything, but because something that once symbolized being forgotten now held someone else's beginnings. I didn't reply right away. Some stories don't need responses. They just need to be witnessed and lived differently. I never imagined healing would look like a photo of a child I've never met, sitting in the chair I once cried in, or that peace could feel like not replying to a message, like letting the silence speak, for once, on my terms. They never said sorry. There were no dramatic reunions, no sudden texts, no family meetings under warm light. But maybe healing doesn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes it's in the small moments, the way her daughter holds that crayon, the way the chair doesn't creak anymore, the way I don't flinch when I hear their voices in my head. I built a life away from them. Not out of revenge, but out of necessity. And somewhere along that quiet path, I stopped waiting for someone to invite me in. I made my own room, with my own chair. And this time, there's always a seat for someone who's felt like a guest in their own family. So now I ask you, if you stood on that porch, would you have opened the door? Or would you have left the chair, just like I did, and walked away?